So automobile accidents, police and civilian firearms. In fact, in 1997, I can tell you because I was living in the US at the time, 1997 was the first year that more people had died through accidental firearm incidents than through automobile accidents in the US. Now, just as a side, you got any idea what kind of numbers we're talking about here? So that's very slight, so say it's the same number. Any idea how many people died from automobile accidents in the US? And this is 1997. Pretty good guess, David. It's 47,000. It was 47,000 from automobile accidents and 47,700 in 1997 from firearm-related incidents. And of course, terrorism. I mean, any idea how many people, forget the military campaigns, but that aside, how many people actually die from terrorism? Once you discount 9/11, once you discount the Madrid bombs on 3/11, the London bombs on 7/7, etc., any idea how many people die from terrorism? None. Big fat zero. And yet we have a war on terror. But, basically, fundamentally, what's killing people is not terror. It's the pharmaceutical industry. And they want more of the action. So why don't we know about it? Well, that's really very simple. The dumbing down process is remarkable. It's very, very successful. A couple of weeks ago, about 4 weeks ago, on BBC One, I think it was 8:30 in the evening, on BBC One, there was a program which was the BBC doing a bit of balanced reporting, and it was presenting the case for a DNA database. On Channel 4 was Peter Oborne doing an expose of corruption in the EU. On ITV was Coronation Street. Now, which of those programs? Forget it, you know the answer. And people are starting to realize and ask questions, even in the semi-mainstream media, about the impact of food. This dumbing down process, coupled with a dire reduction in food quality, is taking its toll. This is the New Scientist, the all-American high. Can fast food alter your brain in the same way as tobacco and heroin? Well, I've got to tell you that it's actually nearly 30 years since my first experience of realizing that food impacts on behavior. And at the time, I was a young training officer with Schlumberger. And we had an apprentice there who, at the time, he was a punk. I mean, he came in, to work every day dressed like a punk, which was not a problem. He was a wonderful character. I mean, I've always worked on the basis that, I want people working in my teams who have, some drive. My basic principle is it is far easier to rein in a bucking bronco than it is to try and kickstart a dead donkey. Well, this guy was a serious bucking bronco. And I didn't want to lose the guy, but, his behavior was unpredictable to say the least. Anyway, we had a company doctor, and I went to speak to this company doctor, and I sat and listened to him, and he went on for me about 20 minutes saying how he believed that if he could get this guy to change his diet, it would change his behavior. And I sat there thinking, yeah, right. Anyway, I had a lot of respect for this particular doctor, and I persuaded this young man to come in to see the doctor with his mother. And I told him basically this was his last chance. I mean, if this didn't work out, there was no way the company was going to be able to keep him on the payroll. Anyway, he came in and he agreed to abide by the diet plan that this doctor, this is 1979, that this doctor put in front of him. I kid you not, 6 weeks later, I didn't recognize that young man. And he didn't recognize himself either. And this is totally without any medication. It was totally on the basis of whatever that doctor had recommended as change of diet. And that was my first experience. I just logged it. It was at the time it was no more than that. I just logged it, but I recognized that there was a link. This was from the Daily Mail just a few days ago. EU ethics experts are expected to call for a ban on clone farming amid concern over animal welfare. But look at this piece here. This is so significant. The US Food and Drug Administration is expected to give approval for the sale of clone animal food without labelling in the next few weeks. This is another part of the Codex. The Food Labelling Committee is the responsibility of the Canadians, very close obviously to the US. A lot of pressure from the US. And if we know that food that is labelled has an effect on behaviour, what the hell are we going to do when we have no idea what crap we're eating? I mean, this is how the organic farming is being put under threat. Because once the labelling is removed, how is the consumer to determine whether the piece of meat they're buying is cloned, is contaminated with growth hormone? You know, it shouldn't be any surprise to you that Texas is the largest provider of prime beef in the US, and where do the biggest people live? Yeah? That growth hormone doesn't just stop in the beef. I mean, there's the physical evidence. I lived in Texas for 4.5 years. I mean, they're monsters. It's like living in a land of giants. Thank God Ritalin wasn't around when my young apprentice had his problems. But this is an extremely pernicious drug. This was in the Daily Mail. Literally, I think this was the beginning of the week. And, you know, here we have a situation, again, where the media are telling us what's going on. Look at the headline here, the sub-headline. Thousands of hyperactive children are being given Ritalin, which can stunt growth, or even the schizophrenic drugs. Are they victims of greedy drug firms and doctors too quick to diagnose a condition many say doesn't exist? In the US right now, and this is actually quoted in this article, the article's here if anybody wants to take a look at it. In the US, 10% of all school-aged children are prescribed Ritalin. 10%. 10%. And it's increasing in the UK. From this article again, perhaps most disturbing is the suggestion that ADHD is nothing more than the invention of pharmaceutical companies who have used clinical trials to create a disease that can be treated with their drugs. Last year, the NHS spent $28 million on Ritalin alone. Now, Ritalin is a stimulant. I mean, basically, it's likened to cocaine. I mean, we'd be mortified if any parent gave their kids cocaine, but this is effectively what we're doing. In fact, the doctors actually don't understand how Ritalin works because it's a stimulant, yet it has the opposite effect. It calms them down. And some of you may have seen a Panorama broadcast a few weeks ago where they were talking to families that were prescribing Ritalin. And this mother of a hyperactive young girl said, you know, well, yeah, it's nice to actually sort of see her calm and sitting at the table, but it's not my daughter. It's not my daughter. We're condemning these kids to a life of prescribed drugs. You know, we are, basically, it is becoming a zombie nation. And we're cutting away the possibility of any spiritual connect at any juncture in their life. Which, of course, is by design. And for the adults, then it's Prozac. And I had a doctor friend of mine, and I asked him, you know, why it was that, you know, out of the people that I knew, it was always more women that were on Prozac than it was the men. And he said, well, that's very easy. He said, because the guys have to be dead before they go see a doctor. He said, whereas the women are much more comfortable to go see their doctor, and the doctor is just too quick to prescribe Prozac. And then now what's happening is a lot of doctors have little more than a database. You know, what's your problem? Oh, stress? Shh. Oh, Prozac. You know, I mean, they're not even making any informed decision. It's just key in the information into the database, and they're being paid $250,000 a year to provide that information. It's outrageous. Oh, and obviously this was for my benefit. You know, the daily super pill for men over 50. Well, apparently this is the basis, this drug is the same basis as this experiment here. Well, this was on the front page of The Independent at the beginning of this month, Friday the 2nd of November. And they tried it out fortunately, they tried it out in mice before they decided to offer it to the 50-year-old men. And this is on the front page of The Independent. It says, it can run for hours